Imagine standing on the shores of the Indian Ocean more than 600 years ago. On the horizon, hundreds of sails appear. At their head is Admiral Zheng He, commander of one of the greatest fleets of his age. His ships will visit distant kingdoms and return with treasures and exotic animals rarely seen in China. For a brief, extraordinary time, Ming China ruled the waves. And then, almost as suddenly as they appeared, the great fleets were gone. What happened to China's magnificent treasure ships? This is their story. In the early 1400s, Ming China was one of the wealthiest and most powerful empires in the world. The Yongle Emperor wanted to display that power far beyond China's shores. To lead his great expeditions, Yongle chose Admiral Zheng He, a trusted commander at his court. But before the fleet could cross the ocean, China had to build it. Along the Yangtze River at Nanjing, enormous shipyards came alive. Thousands of workers cut and shaped timber, built great wooden hulls and made sails and ropes. The most famous were the great treasure ships, or Bao Chuan. Ming records describe some as astonishingly large, although historians still debate their exact size. Imagine the resources needed. There were forests of timber, huge quantities of rope and cloth, and thousands of skilled workers. When the ships were finally ready, the harbor must have been an extraordinary sight. Towering masts and sails stretched into the distance, waiting to carry Ming China across the seas. The treasure ships may have been the stars of the fleet, but they did not sail alone. Zheng He commanded an enormous floating city with different ships built for different purposes. Some carried horses and soldiers, others carried fresh water, grain and supplies. Smaller vessels moved between the larger ships and into busy ports. And then there were the people. Sailors and soldiers were joined by officials, interpreters, navigators, craftsmen, doctors and diplomats. On Zheng He's first voyage in 1405, records describe more than 300 vessels carrying around 27,000 men. Imagine preparing to feed and supply that many people for months at sea. Keeping this floating city moving was an enormous task. At last, the day of departure had arrived. Sails were raised, anchors were lifted. One by one, the ships moved down the Yangtze toward the coast. Soon the harbor was behind them, and an entire floating city was heading out to sea. Ahead lay thousands of miles of ocean, and a world waiting beyond the horizon. Once at sea, Zheng He's fleet entered a maritime world that had connected Asia for centuries. The ships sailed south towards Southeast Asia, passing the busy ports of Java and Sumatra. From there, they continued to the great trading center of Malacca. Then they crossed the Indian Ocean towards Sri Lanka and the rich ports of India. Chinese sailors had many ways to find their way across the seas. They used compasses, charts, the stars and generations of seafaring knowledge. They also understood the seasonal monsoon winds. These winds helped carry ships across the Indian Ocean and, when the seasons changed, helped bring them home again. Tropical storms could turn calm waters violent. But Zheng He kept sailing west. Over 7 voyages, his ships reached the Persian Gulf and Arabia. Parts of the fleet continued all the way to the coast of East Africa. With every new harbor came a different world. There were new languages and customs, magnificent cities, unfamiliar faces, and goods rarely seen in China. For the men who had sailed so far from home, the adventure was only beginning. Now the voyages became a journey through some of the richest trading ports of the Indian Ocean. In Southeast Asia, tropical harbors were crowded with ships and merchants from across the region. In India, Zheng He's crews entered colorful markets filled with spices, fine textiles, precious stones, and goods from distant lands. Farther west, the wealthy port of Hormuz brought together merchants from Persia, Arabia, India, and beyond. Every port offered something new. And treasures moved in both directions. Chinese silk and porcelain traveled overseas. The ships returned with spices, precious materials, unusual goods, and exotic animals. Foreign rulers sent gifts and envoys, some of whom sailed back with the fleet to visit the magnificent Ming court. One visitor caused a sensation. Among the most remarkable gifts was a giraffe from East Africa. To people at the Ming court, this extraordinary animal seemed to resemble the legendary Kilin. Its arrival caused such excitement that it was even recorded in paintings. For Ming China, these voyages brought distant worlds dramatically closer. These great voyages were about more than adventure. The Ming emperors wanted to display China's wealth and power. They also wanted to build relationships with foreign rulers and encourage trade across the seas. Zheng He carried magnificent gifts from the emperor and returned with foreign goods and envoys. But behind diplomacy stood military strength. Thousands of soldiers sailed with the fleet. They fought pirates in Southeast Asia and in campaigns as far away as Sri Lanka. But this remarkable age would be surprisingly brief. After the Yongle Emperor died in 1424, priorities at the Ming court began to change. The enormous expeditions were expensive. At the same time, threats along China's northern frontier demanded more attention and resources. Zheng He sailed once more from 1431 to 1433. The Ming government never again sent treasure fleets. Within a few decades, the magnificent fleets that had once filled distant harbors were gone. 6 centuries later, Zheng He and his treasure ships are still remembered. Their voyages remain one of the most remarkable maritime adventures in Chinese history. What impresses you the most about Zheng He's treasure fleets? The enormous ships, the distant voyages, or the exotic places they visited? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into Chinese history, please subscribe to Asia Traditions and click the bell so you don't miss future videos.